Hi, good afternoon. This is Annie. I am building a business, and these are my notes and my thoughts as I try to define what this business actually is. So, this is in the absolute infancy stage, and the origin here is that I have a background in finance, but I've stumbled my way into this gig helping a startup owner who has a medtech platform, and they are also in a very much so an infancy stage, trying to get a website going that will eventually be their business. But they really had almost no documentation, no structure, and importantly, this owner is very much so a high level, passionate, visionary thinker, which I guess is, pretty typical, or, can be common in the world of entrepreneurs. And I have just such a different way of thinking. Um, if you're familiar, it's sort of that integrator visionary dynamic. And if you're not familiar, that is from Gino Wickman's book Traction and the EOS, that's the Entrepreneurial Operating System program. You should absolutely check it out. But they describe this dynamic as sort of, a yin and yang, constantly really butting heads, and they use this concept of traction, and sort of explain it like the visionary is just constantly, has their, foot on the gas, spinning their wheels, and the integrator, has their, foot on the brakes and is, pumping the brakes or, slamming their foot down on the brakes, when necessary, and that's needed to, gain traction, because otherwise you're just, spinning your wheels going nowhere, or, you're just stopped. So that's that concept. And it's been such an interesting experience. I have learned that I really like this experience, and I would like to work with more visionary founders who are in the early stages of their business. And help them put together structure and documentation with that structure, and a plan to really be able to scale. I would like to save them a lot of money on discovery costs. And so, I found myself going back to three really basic questions, and the whole concept for this business is kind of formed around that. And so I just kept realizing, like, we really can't answer the question, what are you? As far as business classification goes. In this instance, it was either being a platform, just purely the website, or being an employment agency. And there's a really big difference there. And the next question was, what do you do? So that's just, the service and product offering. And one change in that second question is, what was prompting the change to the first question? Because providing one more service really pushes this model into that platform. And then also just the how do you do it, your operational reality. And everything really changes when, one of the first questions, the answer is to it also changes. And now I'm just getting so curious, wondering, if I can go to networking events or start talking to people, what will founders who are a year or 2 years or, however many years down the line, if they had written down themselves, what am I, or, what is this business, question mark, and what do you do, how much would that really have changed? And now again, I'm really in the infancy stage myself, but in an effort to figure out what I'm doing, how can I help, what problems am I solving with my own business, it's like, well, I would like to help visionary founders get structure for compliance, for their operational health, for audit frameworks, and regulatory purposes, just everything. I would like to get them organized and to give them enough structure that they can scale in a way that's much less stressful and much less expensive than they would otherwise. So, in order to do that, I ended up thinking of this concept of a company playbook. And so that's really how I started, for myself. Because I keep going back to those three questions. Like, I need to have a really solid answer to those three questions. What are you, what do you do, and how do you do it? So it started with just that, writing that down. What is this company? And my answer was a specialized advisory practice that designs the structural architecture of companies, the documented systems, frameworks, contracts, and operational foundations that would allow a business to function clearly and scale responsibly. And originally, when I said, what does this company do? I said, we build playbooks. And I was really, going around this concept. And now my idea of playbook is that it's meant to be a comprehensive structural document that defines how a company actually works. Not what it hopes to do, not, just the market opportunities, but how it actually functions. The business model, revenue flows, operational systems, contractual relationships, its regulatory exposure, and internal controls, all documented. And, this is really broad. And I think this is where a lot of, companies get stuck. Going back to EOS, one of the processes for adopting the entrepreneurial operating system is documenting all your processes. And man, is it ever easy to get really stuck there. Just write down everything that you do. I mean, that's painful and much harder than, you'd think it would be. But my point here to start was, I guess giving myself a structure to start. So I wanted this document to be, all encompassing, but to concretely answer those questions. What are you? What do you do? And how do you do it? And also addressing the major questions that I think need to be answered in the infancy stage of a business, and at every point of a business. And you're just thinking about all the times you go into a new lawyer or accountant or any sort of partner and need to explain from the beginning what this company actually is, and what it does, and some of the stats and details that are needed. So I made a list, and I've said, part of my process here is I'm saying version 1.0, my first printable version of a playbook, which I'm considering my company's core deliverable. It has to, concretely answer those three questions. And I've made a list of everything, to go through, and I think each one of these should be addressed in writing. And if you just do this, then you can pass version 1.0 and print your playbook. And part of the thing there is making sure that we don't get stuck in, the perfection loop. Saying, well, I don't have every process mapped out. I don't have every contract written. And that's okay, as long as I addressed that and I wrote it down. So I start with the company's identity, like its purpose, mission, values. Then on to services, what do you do? What problems does what you do solve? Then the market and customers, like who are your target clients, at least some context of the market. A bit of marketing strategy, what's your first plan there? A general business model. So my goal for this playbook is that it also does encompass a business plan, but it's more of a framework to be built on at the same time. So I mean, a bit about your business model there, your revenue model, pricing structure, and importantly, a value justification. Then let's see, your operational architecture, just something about how does your company function, the roles, responsibilities, governance and authority, who has authority to make what decisions. And part of my thing here is that, well, I'm making a really basic company to start. This is just me. So I'm like, okay, if I can follow my own system and set it up this way, that's easier. My org chart right now is one rectangle. So let's see, then your processes, documented workflows, information knowledge systems, legal and contract architecture, revenue flow and financial structure. Oh, okay. And then I have a few more things here. But that is my start with this deliverable. And as I'm saying this, I'm like, oh, I feel like I've just gone over everybody's heads. Everybody's like, wait a minute, what are you doing? You're making a book? I'm like, yes, I'm making your business and I put it in a book. And my intention is to have, everything, that's an ongoing document for the company. I want to have it. So in the most complete form of this playbook, it may contain every major policy, process, every contract, every system used by the business, all together. And I'm imagining this as a physical book, but there'll also be a corresponding intranet. I'll think about, some of the companies that I work for or have worked for, and their intranet, and it has all those things. Here's our branding, use this PowerPoint template. Here is our core values. Here are our core values. Here's every written process, blah blah blah. So I would like that to be a deliverable, and that's how I'm starting making my company, is getting that documented. And now that I have gotten, my initial book here answering what is this? What does it do? And how does it do it? I think I can show it to people and get feedback. So that's the start of this. Again, it's notes and thoughts. I want to really go into business structure and, stories, like how did Uber evolve, or Airbnb, and really look at, business classification and then scalability. So, I mean, there's some really interesting ones there, obviously, with, Uber and, just being a website versus being whatever they turned into, and, all of the regulatory, roadblocks and how they dealt with it. That's, quite a journey. But, then there's also Amazon as an example, and, they didn't run into the same, massive regulatory or classification changes, but they did go from being like, I'm a bookstore, to I provide, nearly everything under the sun, and, run a fleet of cars, or, all the things that they do. So I would like to be able to help those companies from their, infancy stage, and give them a structure that will really make scalability much more affordable and less stressful. I would like to help, or I would like to get companies into a position where they can really take care of their employees better, experience less stress. And yeah, this is really fun. I don't know, if it's gonna work, if this will, be what I end up actually doing, but it's a really fun project. And right now I've told myself that I will get this, document and my business plan to a, reasonable printed and digital format, and go to some networking events and talk to some people about it. And so that is my goal for right now, that I am, assigning myself, and I am holding myself to it. So this is just the start. I would love to talk to other business owners and founders, and I would love to, get your opinion about so many things. But one of them is, how would you answer that question? If, from day one, somebody made you write down, what are you? What is this company? And you had 2 sentences to do it. And, they also asked, what do you do? And you have two sentences. How would that have changed, if at all? Or, just what are your thoughts there? So awesome. I'm really happy you're listening, and I hope you have a great day.